Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling economic inequality in the U.S.
Ooh, big topic.
It is a big one. And we've got a fascinating source to unpack.
Okay.
It sort of builds on a recent Bernie Sanders YouTube video.
I've seen that one. Yeah, he really goes in on this issue.
He does. And I'm excited to dig into it with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I know economics can sometimes feel a little bit dry.
It can be.
But
yeah.
I promise you this deep dive will be anything key to me.
I believe you.
All right. So Sanders starts off with this really startling statistic.
Oh, here we go.
The richest 1% of Americans now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined.
Wow. That's crazy when you actually think about it.
It's a hard number to even grasp. What does that even look like?
It is. And the source material actually points out that this isn't a new phenomenon.
Right.
This gap has been widening for decades.
Yeah.
Since 1989, the wealth of the top 1% has increased by over $21 trillion.
It's like an unfathomable sum of money.
It is. And to put that into perspective, that's more than the entire GDP of many countries.
Wow.
Imagine if that wealth were more evenly distributed.
Right.
The investments we could make in education, healthcare infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, the things we could do as a society would be amazing.
Exactly.
And it's not like everyone's been struggling equally.
Oh, absolutely not.
The pandemic really highlighted this disparity.
Oh, yeah, for sure. While millions were losing their jobs and struggling to make ends meet, billionaires saw their wealth increase by $1.8 trillion.
It's almost like we're talking about two different countries.
Yeah, it really shows how economic shocks don't affect everyone equally.
And that's what Sanders is getting at when he talks about this danger of oligarchy.
Right. When so much wealth and power are concentrated at the top, it can really distort our political system.
Think about it. They have the resources to influence elections, lobby for policies that benefit them, even shape media narratives.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle.
Right. The richer they get, the more influence they have.
Exactly. And it makes it harder and harder to level the playing field.
So it begs the question, is this kind of extreme inequality compatible with a healthy democracy?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Can we truly have a government that represents everyone's interests when a small group holds so much sway?
It's something to think about, for sure.
Now, another point Sanders makes is about the disconnect between wages and productivity.
Yeah, what's going on there?
It seems like people are working harder than ever, but they're not really getting ahead.
It's like you're running on a treadmill but going nowhere.
Exactly. So the source material tells us that worker productivity has soared since the 1980s.
Over 60%, in fact.
But wages have barely budged.
Especially when you account for inflation.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah.
The source material also states that the average CEO now makes 320 times more than the typical worker.
That's a huge gap.
And meanwhile, the federal minimum wage is still stuck at $7.25 an hour.
It hasn't been raised since 2009.
That's unbelievable. It really highlights how the economic pie is being sliced.
Yeah, those at the top are capturing a bigger and bigger share.
Leaving less and less for everyone else.
Exactly.
It almost feels like no matter how hard you work, you're not going to get ahead if you're not already at the top.
That's a sentiment I think a lot of people share.
It raises the question, are there ways to create a system that's more equitable?
Right. One that rewards hard work regardless of where you start.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about healthcare costs.
Okay.
This is something I think we can all relate to in some way.
For sure.
Americans are paying way more for the same medications compared to other developed countries.
It's true. Sometimes 2 or 3 times more.
Why should we have to choose between filling a prescription or putting food on the table?
It's a tough reality for many.
And it's not like we're getting better outcomes for all this extra spending.
Right. The U.S. spends nearly $4 trillion annually on healthcare.
More than any other country.
Yet millions remain uninsured or underinsured.
It's a system that seems to prioritize profit over people.
It raises the question, is healthcare a human right or just another commodity?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And the consequences are serious. The source states that medical debt is a leading cause of bankruptcy.
Over 500,000 families affected each year.
It's a vicious cycle that highlights the need for systemic change.
Agreed. Access to affordable quality healthcare should be a right, not a privilege.
Okay, so we've got the wealth gap, stagnant wages, and now the healthcare crisis.
What's next?
Well, Sanders also brings up Social Security
Oh, boy.
and the future of it.
Right.
It's a lifeline for so many seniors.
Over 40% rely on it for most of their income.
And the source material paints a pretty grim picture of its future.
Yeah, projections show the current system could run short of funds by 2035.
That's not that far off.
It's a ticking time bomb.
So what can we do? Sanders proposes raising the cap on taxable income for Social Security.
Okay.
Right now, it's capped at $160,200.
So those earning above that don't pay any additional Social Security taxes on that income.
Exactly. It's about ensuring the wealthy contribute their fair share to a program that benefits everyone.
I see. It's a controversial idea.
It is, but it gets at this core issue of economic inequality.
Are we okay with a system where the wealthiest are paying proportionally less?
Into programs that support the most vulnerable.
It's a question of values and priorities.
Okay, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive,
Right.
there's one more piece I want to touch on.
Okay.
Citizens United.
Yes.
This is where we see how economic inequality spills into the political arena.
Absolutely.
So Citizens United essentially opened the floodgates for corporations and wealthy donors to spend unlimited amounts of money on elections.
Giving them a huge advantage.
Right, and it led to a surge in dark money.
Anonymous political contributions making it difficult to track who's influencing our elections.
Exactly, and it's not just elections. It's given corporate lobbyists even more power.
To push for policies that benefit their bottom line, often at the expense of the public.
Sanders argues that this decision further tilts the playing field in favor of the wealthy.
And undermines the very principles of democracy.
When money becomes the dominant force in politics, the average citizen loses their voice.
It's a sobering thought.
It brings us back to this core issue of economic inequality and its far-reaching impact.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part.
But the growing wealth gap, stagnant wages,
The healthcare crisis, the strain on Social Security.
and the outsized influence of money in politics.
It's a lot to process.
It is, but stay with us. In the next part, we'll delve into some of the solutions that Sanders proposes to address these challenges.
Okay, I'm ready for some hope. Welcome back to our deep dive on economic inequality.
It's been heavy stuff.
It has. We've painted a pretty stark picture so far, right?
We have the widening wealth gap, stagnant wages, the struggles with healthcare, Social Security.
Oh, right. And of course, the influence of money in politics.
Especially after Citizens United.
Exactly. But it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, definitely not. In this part, we're going to look at some solutions that Sanders proposes in the source material.
All right.
I was actually surprised by how detailed his ideas are.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just like vague calls for change.
Right.
He lays out concrete policies he believes could make a real difference.
Oh, okay. I'm interested to hear this.
So let's get into it.
All right.
One of the most prominent solutions is taxing the wealthy more aggressively.
Okay.
And he's not talking about small tweaks here.
I see.
This is a significant restructuring of the tax code.
Wow.
He mentions things like a wealth tax on the top 0.1%,
Okay.
increasing the estate tax, closing loopholes corporations use to avoid paying their fair share. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the underlying principle seems to be that those who have benefited most from the current system should contribute more.
Right. To create a more level playing field.
Exactly. It's a question of fairness. Should someone making billions of dollars a year
Pay a lower effective tax rate than a teacher or a nurse?
I see what you mean.
And for a long time, the idea has been cut taxes for the wealthy and the benefits will trickle down.
Right. The trickle-down theory.
But Sanders really pushes back against that.
He does.
The source material suggests that trickle-down economics hasn't really worked.
Not for most Americans.
Wages have remained stagnant. The wealth gap continues to widen.
So he's proposing a different approach.
One that directly addresses the concentration of wealth at the top.
Interesting. But wouldn't taxing the wealthy discourage investment?
That's a common argument.
And hurt the economy in the long run?
Right. That's the concern.
It's a debate economists have been having for years.
The source material doesn't really get into the potential downsides of these tax proposals.
I see.
But it does point out that countries with higher taxes on the wealthy, like many in Scandinavia, still have strong economies and high standards of living.
So it's not a simple equation.
No, it's complex. It's something that warrants more investigation, for sure.
Agreed. Okay, what else does Sanders propose?
Another big area he focuses on is education.
Education.
He's a strong advocate for making public colleges and universities tuition-free.
Wow.
And canceling existing student debt.
That's a big one.
Those are ambitious goals, but they speak to this idea that education should be a right.
Not a privilege.
Exactly. The source material highlights the crippling effects of student loan debt.
Yeah.
Millions of people are delaying major life decisions
Buying a home, starting a family.
because they're saddled with debt.
It's a huge burden.
Imagine graduating from college without that burden.
It would be a game changer.
And Sanders argues it would benefit the economy.
How so?
People with more disposable income would spend more.
Stimulating economic growth.
Plus, a more educated workforce leads to innovation.
And increased productivity.
Right. But how do we pay for all of this?
Yeah, tuition-free college and debt cancellation would be expensive.
It would be. The source material acknowledges that.
Okay.
It says these proposals require significant investment.
Right.
But it points out that we're already spending trillions on things like defense.
Mm-hmm. Or corporate subsidies.
Sanders argues that we need to reevaluate our priorities.
I see. To invest in people, not just corporations and the military.
It's about making choices.
Deciding what we value as a society.
Okay, so we've got taxing the wealthy, investing in education.
What's next?
Another key area is the environment.
Okay.
Sanders is a big proponent of the Green New Deal.
Oh, yeah. It's a big one.
It's a plan to address climate change
Mm-hmm.
while creating jobs in renewable energy and sustainable infrastructure.
It's a bold plan.
It is. And this issue really resonates with younger generations.
Makes sense. It's their future at stake.
The source material highlights the devastating effects of climate change,
Extreme weather, rising sea levels.
and it makes a strong case for taking action now.
Like right now.
The Green New Deal isn't just about mitigating the negative impacts.
Right.
It's about creating a more sustainable and equitable future.
By investing in clean energy
Energy efficiency, public transportation.
and creating jobs in sectors that are focused on a greener economy.
It's almost like reimagining what our economy could look like.
Moving away from fossil fuels towards a more sustainable model.
And Sanders argues this transition is not only necessary,
Mm-hmm.
it's an opportunity to create jobs.
And revitalize communities that have been left behind.
It's a bold vision, but one I think a lot of people are ready for.
So we've got taxing the wealthy, education, the Green New Deal,
What else?
anything else.
He also addresses affordable housing.
Oh, that's a huge issue.
It's a crisis in many parts of the country,
Rising rents, stagnant wages, lack of affordable options.
leading to increasing homelessness and housing insecurity,
It's heartbreaking to see people struggle to find a place to live.
especially families with children.
Yeah.
Having a safe and affordable home is a basic need.
A foundation for everything else.
Exactly. Sanders proposes expanding affordable housing options.
Through investments in public housing.
Right. Rent control measures incentives for developers to build more affordable units,
He's also talking about addressing the root causes of homelessness
like mental health and addiction.
through increased funding for social services,
It's a multi-pronged approach.
tackling the issue from different angles.
It's not just about charity. It's about creating a system where everyone has a chance.
To have a decent place to live.
Okay, so we've covered taxing the wealthy, education, the Green New Deal, and affordable housing.
What's left?
The final piece is strengthening unions
Unions. Interesting.
and protecting workers' rights.
Okay.
He sees this as crucial to empowering workers.
To negotiate for better wages, benefits, working conditions.
It's about balancing power
Giving workers more leverage.
so they can demand a fairer share.
But haven't unions been declining in power?
They have. The source material goes into some of the reasons for that.
Like what?
Anti-union legislation, globalization, automation.
I see.
But Sanders argues that revitalizing the labor movement is essential.
To address economic inequality.
Stronger unions can help raise wages, improve working conditions.
And provide a counterbalance to corporate power.
For a long time, unions were seen as this adversarial force.
Pitted against businesses.
But maybe we need to reframe that.
To see them as a vital part of a healthy economy.
A force that can help create a more equitable distribution of wealth.
That's an interesting perspective.
When workers have more money to spend, it benefits everyone.
It does. So to recap,
We've got taxing the wealthy, the Green New Deal,
affordable housing.
and strengthening unions.
These are ambitious goals.
They are.
Hmm.
And it's important to remember these are just proposals,
Right.
starting points for a larger conversation.
Okay.
There will be debates about their feasibility, their potential impact.
And how to actually implement them.
But what's exciting is that we're having these conversations
That people are engaging with these ideas.
and thinking about how we can create a more just and equitable society.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last two parts really getting into economic inequality in the U.S.
Yeah, a lot of information. It has been. We've explored the challenges, Dove into some bold solutions.
Some big ideas from Bernie Sanders.
He's got some big ideas. I hope you're feeling as engaged as I am.
Definitely. It's been fascinating.
It's almost like we're looking at two completely different visions for the future.
It does feel that way.
One where inequality continues to widen.
And the consequences become more and more severe.
Right. And then this other vision where we take bold steps
to create a more equitable society.
What struck me while going through the source material was the sense of urgency that Sanders conveys.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not about making small tweaks.
Right. We're at a crossroads.
We are. The choices we make today will have a profound impact on the future.
No doubt about it.
He really seems to believe that this level of inequality isn't just morally wrong, it's a threat to our democracy.
When so much wealth and power are concentrated in the hands of so few,
it erodes the principles of fairness and equal opportunity,
which our country is supposed to be built on. It undermines people's faith in the system.
Creates social unrest.
Makes it harder to address other challenges.
Like climate change, healthcare.
So many things.
So what can we do about it?
It's a big question.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed.
I get that.
But one of the takeaways from this deep dive is that we're not powerless.
We're not. It's a call to action.
It is. Recognizing that we have a responsibility to create a more just and equitable society.
And that starts with understanding the issues.
Which we've done in this deep dive.
We have. And now it's about channeling that understanding into something productive.
Exactly. Right. Whether it's voting in elections, supporting organizations working on these issues,
contacting our elected officials, even just having conversations with friends and family.
Raising awareness, building momentum, pushing for change.
And it's not just about adopting Sanders' proposals.
Right. It's about dialogue.
Exploring different solutions, finding what works best.
And remembering that change doesn't happen overnight.
It takes time, persistence, a willingness to challenge the status quo.
It's inspiring to see so many people getting involved in these movements.
Especially young people. They're demanding a better future.
It gives you hope.
It does. It reminds you that even in the face of huge challenges,
we still have the power to create change.
We do. And that's why it's so important to stay engaged, stay informed.
Use our voices to make a difference.
Because the future depends on the choices we make today.
Well said. This deep dive has been an incredible journey.
It has. We've examined the challenges, explored solutions.
Hopefully sparked some important conversations.
And while we've reached the end of this deep dive, the exploration doesn't end here.
It doesn't.
We encourage you to keep learning, stay curious, engage with these issues.
Because it's through that collective effort,
that shared commitment to creating a more just and equitable world,
that we can build a brighter future for all.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into economic inequality in the U.S.
We'll be back soon with another episode exploring a new topic and diving deep into the issues that matter most.
Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep striving for a better world.